Hello, it's Mark Siddall again, and this time we're going to be taking a bit of a deep dive into the after unit, which is basically the monitoring process period and making sure that everything works and seeing how everything bedded in. So, without any more ado, let's see what we've got. Now, as you recall, Trevor and Judith stuck out in the middle of nowhere. They were, when I first met them, they were renting a little dark, dank bothy that was not a particularly healthy place to be. Trevor had to chop the wood and to heat the house, and had to take all the ashes out. All of the soot and everything, was a good chunk of it was actually coming back into the house because the stove was actually that bad, and it got so cold in there that it was really desperate as an environment. There was mould in the bathroom, and it was taking a long time for the clothes to dry. It was really not a great place to be, and it was really having an impact upon Trevor and Judith's life. They couldn't really get the grandkids around in the winter because it was just so cold. So it was causing all sorts of frustrations in that respect. So here we are, just as a quick run through. As you'll recall, we've got Siddall Farm. It's about 8 miles away from Hexham, about 3 miles away from the nearest main road, and here we've got it looking at the house from the southeast, I beg your pardon, and from the northwest. As we rotate round, and we start to have a look at the building from the south. So just giving you a bit of a feel for the building and how it sits into the landscape and the surroundings. And then from the inside, now I mentioned in one of the earlier videos how the design really focused upon framing views. So imagine this. Imagine that you've woken up in the morning and then you're confronted with this view. It really does set you up. It's very hard to get a feel for this when you come through when you're looking at these photographs. But another thought was actually during the design process was how people move up and move through the building. So if you're coming in from the ground floor and you're circulating up that staircase coming towards where we're stood effectively, then what you get is a situation whereby it's this hall space, this landing space, is washed with daylight, but it's all above eye level. When you're actually stood on that landing down there, that windowsill is more or less at head level, so you don't really tend to be able to see out much, which is all purposeful and very deliberate, because what that means is that when you really get the benefit of your view when you're coming down the stairs, and it's not just generally available. So there's a bit of a game that's been played there. The timber frames, as I say, are framing the views of the landscape. The detailing is all quite stripped back with little throw details to help push the water away from the face of the stonework. But the eaves is very tightly cropped to keep some nice crisp straight lines for contemporary lines. And then the way that the deep reveals help provide shading is another key element here. We didn't want to be putting lots of shading all over the building, so we started to control that very carefully as well. The MVHR system, the mechanical ventilation with heat recovery systems, all controlled off an LCD panel, LED panel, and we've looked at the MVHR unit already in the solar thermal here on the right hand side. That's been super insulated with 100mm of insulation to minimise those heat losses, not just to prevent the additional heat loss in terms of water use, but also to help to minimise overheating risks during the summer periods, which is all going to play a part in that monitoring process in many respects. We've got the very well day-lit kitchen, living, dining area, and the way that again the windows are framing the views and helping to provide a real appreciation of the landscape that you're in, and allowing Trevor and Judith to see out across the farm to the sheep, cattle, etc. that they've got kicking around on the hills, so that they can safeguard them during the winter should they be out there, or in the darker seasons at least. And we've got the ground floor office, which, as I say, can be converted over into a bedroom should that be required at a later date. And then I think, yeah, here we go actually. This is the sequence as you go upstairs, so you can see how the views are somewhat kind of given and denied as you circulate up the staircase before you actually start to look back down the stairs or actually take in that view out into the landscape beyond. So it was in February 2014 that Steel Farm got certified, and we put the plaque up as we were shooting the video for the Passivhaus Trust Awards, which we were doing earlier in June 2015, and the building's got an EPC rating of B, with a potential of 97 according to the study from the EPC. And what were the cost of the total bills over a 3-year period is estimated using the EPC approach or to be less than 1,100, but just around £1,100 per year. In terms of environmental impact, the house gets an A rating of 93 with a potential of 99. And what was quite interesting was the solar photovoltaic panels, which had an indicative cost of between £11,000 and £20,000. They were going to only save £226 per year, which meant that the return on investment would be less than 2%. It would take 48 years for them to pay back. Of course, this is ignoring all the cost of replacement for the inverters and other maintenance. So make of that what you will, and yes, it is ignoring the feed-in tariffs and the likes, but it gives you a real understanding of what the real costs are for photovoltaics. So, energy costs. What did it really? What are the real bills? Well, here you can see just two 47-kilogram cylinders that Trevor and Judith are using to heat their home. Well, they actually only get through 6 of those in the course of a 12-month period, and we've actually got 2 years worth of data on this to verify that. So it's quite encouraging, and that's just 560 litres of LPG per year, whereas there were in the other year when we were going down to the Passivhaus open days, there was a farm, they were getting some LPG delivered, and rather than lasting a year, 1,000 litres was going to last just around about 2 or 3 months. So that would have been almost 2 years worth of supply for Trevor and Judith. Now, PHPP, the Passivhaus Planning Package, suggested that we were going to be using around about 28 kilowatt hours per metre square per year, and we've actually come in at 24. So reasonably happy with that. Now, what I also did is I had a few data loggers and I threw them into a few different rooms and had an external data logger, because I thought it'd be interesting to see what standards of comfort are really being achieved, not just from the client's perspective, Trevor and Judith's perspective, but also being able to compare that to European standards and see how it works with our design standards. So, a bit of a quote from Judith first though. Judith was saying that before it's hard work having the family come and stay. In the summer everything was okay, but it was a bit depressing in the winter. I had to shut the part of the house because it was so cold. Now everything's much easier and much more cheery. I enjoy using the whole house. So that's a real testament to the benefits of having a designed house that they're now in. I did a very detailed survey with them. Went through 128 different kind of considerations, and the key lessons that we got from that, we were looking at the importance and the satisfaction of the different considerations, and the key thing there was to make sure that the programmer for the thermostat is simpler, and also to do a little bit more refinement on the handover process, so to assist with that program and timer, and make sure that the room starts more easily operated. Now, looking at the actual data, and forgive me for we've got a few graphs coming up. Well, what you can see here in the yellow is the external temperatures, and they start off quite low and work their way up as we go from the left-hand side towards the right-hand side. And one of the things you can see in the final quarter or thereabouts, the final third of the graph, is that there are plenty of times during the summer period, or a few instances at least, where the external temperatures were certainly hotter than inside the house, and that's quite reassuring, I'd argue, because it means that the house has got some buffering to help tolerate any particular heat waves that should hit. This graph looks at the relative humidities, and we can see these big spikes here. They're showing you that the ensuite got very humid. No surprise, because someone's having a shower. But all the other areas, what we're really in design terms trying to do during the winter at least, is remain between 60 and 40% relative humidity. And you can see that by and large, this seems to be working in a characteristic sense. But what we can do is look at this in a bit more detail. The European standards actually allow us to calculate and have an understanding of comfort in a lot more detail. So what we've got here is we have a scatter graph looking at the temperature along the bottom and the relative humidity on the vertical axes, and these are the two readings that have been taken in the various different rooms. And then what I've also done is I've plotted over the top of those some rhombus type shapes. Yes, what they're identifying are the different elements of comfort as might be expected through the European standards. And what you can see is that in the winter, if we have a metabolic rate of 1.3 on average, so with some of the time we're sedentary, we're not doing too much, and our metabolic rate is around 1.2, or we might be standing and walking around and it was 1.6, but on average it's around about 1.3. And what we've also got is we've got our clothing, our clo value, and a clothing value of 1 might be your you're having socks, underwear, jeans, shirt and a jumper. And you can see that that's kind of covering a good spread there. Not everything's falling within that line, but the key thing to note there is that the majority of the temperatures are falling in an acceptable period, falling in the appropriate kind of range. The little red dots that we've got where they're rising up towards 100, they're in the ensuite. So we'd expect some of those instances to happen where the data loggers are picking up that it's been very humid and someone's had a shower. Then we've also got the summer conditions. Now summer still might be dressed in the same amount of clothes, jeans, shirt, jumper, etc. But they might have reduced their metabolic rate. They might be just being very sedentary, or you might actually have someone that's more active and wearing a lighter set of clothes. But either way, that covers the same kind of area. And what you can see now is that both in this range of temperatures with a little bit of adaptation, then we can actually maintain quite high standards of comfort according to the BSEN 7730. But if we then start to have a look at another concept which is known as adaptive comfort, then we'll start to get another set of insights. But before I start to look at that, it's worthwhile also taking a moment to dig in a bit more detail into what actually are being achieved, what's actually been achieved in terms of the risk of overheating in a passive house. Because when you've got a building that's well insulated, a lot of people have the fear that they're going to be more prone to overheating, which in some respects is true, but it's they're only a little bit more prone to overheating and a lot less prone to getting cold. So just how hot does it get in a passive house? Well, what we've got here is the south facing bedroom. Now this was unoccupied, so the amount of time that the windows were open was a lot less, so that strongly influenced things. And even with this kind of consideration in place, it was getting over 25 degrees Celsius for less than 5% of the year, which is really very acceptable. In passive house design, we tend to think that if you don't go above 25 degrees Celsius for more than 10% of the year, that's acceptable, and less than 5% is good practice. So that one room, and those averages are based on the whole house, and we're just looking at one room at the moment. What you've got for the other three rooms that were monitored, the ensuite, the master bedroom and the kitchen, living, dining area, is that those temperatures are all only greater than 25 degrees Celsius for less than 1.5% of the year. So not really what 1.5 days in 100, it's getting over 25 degrees Celsius. not an awful lot. So it's a very comfortable living environment. Now in the winter, Trevor and Judith tend to live, it would seem, at a lower temperature. They actually set their thermostat for 19, but what we can see is that it does, perhaps before they've turned the heating system on, they've allowed it to get down into that 15 to 17, 18 range. And on average, over the course of the whole year, the average temperature is around about 20 degrees Celsius, which is actually quite pitch perfect in terms of the Passivhaus standard, because the Passivhaus standard expects, in theory, the PHPP assumptions are that people are living in a property at 20 degrees Celsius. So in that respect, Trevor and Judith are perfect. Now, I mentioned adaptive comfort. This is a way of looking at the world where what we do is we put clothes on, we take clothes off, temperatures actually rise and fall over periods of time, and we as people, human beings, adjust to those outdoor temperatures in some form and have different expectations of what might be comfortable inside. So this graph is really examining that, and what you can see is you've got the, should we say, the bullseye through the middle, which is a theoretical line. You've then got these two lines that are further out, and that would be 90% satisfaction. The two fatter lines broader than that are 80% satisfaction, and the two lines further out than that are 65% satisfaction for typical scenarios. But of course, individuals will do slightly different things. And this is looking at adaptive comfort through the European standards. But if we go to the United States and we use the same kind of concepts but slightly different calculation formulas, what we find is that in the States, you're allowed, the calculation suggests you're allowed a 1 degree cooler building, and you can see that steel farm is pretty much running through the middle, as opposed to just towards the bottom a little bit, using the UK or European method. So all in all, what it suggests is that Trevor and Judith are living in a house exactly the way that they want to, and they are achieving some very high standards of comfort as reviewed by the different European standards, which is reassuring. What we're not seeing is that the air is too dry, we're not seeing that the temperatures are staying too high, we're not seeing a situation whereby Trevor and Judith aren't able to exert control over their environment. So we've got a really, really kind of positive and, dare I say it, quite rewarding bit of feedback there. And it just suggests that the project actually is a success, which is great. Then digging into a bit more detail, what we're finding is it takes around about 1.5 hours for the relative humidity to fall. So from having the boost button pushed, the kitchen, living, dining area is sitting into this roundabouts 50% relative humidity pretty consistently, and that the house is actually falling in temperature by around about 2 degrees Celsius per day, and then it's warmed up again as the sun comes out and those temperatures start to increase again. Meanwhile, in the summer, we're seeing some higher spikes, and you can see the green spike along the top, and that's basically for the unoccupied south-facing bedroom, which is what you'd really expect. But otherwise, everything's sitting in there quite happy, even on these more detailed levels. And this is the one issue that I had. The clock timer could have benefited from redesign or a different design, and that got some feedback that was, whilst not absolutely damning, was certainly not preferable, and I'd be looking to try and improve something on that in the future. But if you're interested in visiting Steel Farm, then by all means go to passivhouseopendays.co.uk and register your interest over there. Okay, well that is it. You've now heard everything that you can about Steel Farm. You've heard about the before, during and the after, and how the design process worked, how the construction process was undertaken, and also how the project has been delivered in reality. So thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing from you or seeing you at one of the Passivhaus Open Days. I'll speak to you again soon. Cheers.